San Francisco, California, April 15, 1943. The wind off the Pacific Ocean carried a cool, salty breeze, but inside a small office on the top floor of a medical center in San Francisco, the air was thick with tension. Dr. Albert Wright sat behind his desk, a man in his 60s with gray hair neatly tied back and eyes that held not just tiredness but deep determination. In front of him lay several thin folders filled with reports, and beside them an old telephone that had rung 3 times in the last hour. "Dr. Wright?" The voice on the line was raspy but firm. "This is General Harris from the War Department. We've got news. Your method, we tested it in Europe." Wright froze. He hadn't heard that voice in over a year. A year ago, he'd sent his research to military labs, work he'd done alone, without funding, without support, against all rules and traditions. His method, which he called micro-blood filtration, seemed simple. Pass a patient's blood through a special membrane that removed toxins and pathogens without harming red blood cells or immune components. But in the medical world of the 1940s, this idea sounded impossible, too radical, too unscientific. His colleagues called it a forbidden method, not because it was dangerous, but because it challenged everything they thought they knew. "What do you mean?" Wright asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Your method saved lives, 10,000 soldiers, Allied troops on the front lines. They're alive today because their blood was cleaned by your process. In England, France, Italy, we used your prototypes. We need more, and we need you to come." Wright closed his eyes. He hadn't expected this. He thought his work would be ignored, just another attempt to change the world that no one would accept. He never imagined it would be used in battle. He never imagined it would save so many lives. "I'll come," he said, and in his voice a flicker of the old passion returned, the spark he'd lost over the past 10 years. Albert Wright was born in 1887 in a small town in Ohio. His father was a farmer, his mother a homemaker. He went to school locally, then studied medicine at the University of Chicago. He stood out for his sharp observation and love of experimentation. Even as a student, he wondered, why does the human body break down so often when it's meant to heal itself? After graduation, he worked in hospitals, treating wounded soldiers during World War I. That's when he saw the true scale of loss, not just from bullets and bombs, but from infections, sepsis, anaerobic bacteria creeping into open wounds. Treatment was primitive: antiseptics, bandages, sometimes amputations. Still, people died because their blood turned toxic, poisoning their own bodies. In the 1920s, Wright moved to San Francisco, where he opened a private clinic. He became known as a doctor who did the impossible, especially among patients with chronic conditions who had given up on traditional medicine. He treated diabetics, arthritis sufferers, even some with Parkinson's disease. But his real passion? Blood. He believed that the root cause of most illnesses wasn't in the organs, but in the blood. It became polluted, carrying toxins, pathogens, metabolic waste that the body couldn't clear effectively. What if we could clean the blood, like we purify water? Could it become the source of health again? That idea was heresy. Medical science at the time was rooted in biochemical determinism. Illness was caused by chemical imbalances, and treatment meant fixing those chemicals.
The idea of cleaning blood reminded people of 19th century quackery, blood purifiers sold on street corners. Wright knew his idea would be dismissed as nonsense, but he kept going. In his tiny lab, he experimented with different materials: paper filters, ceramic, porous glass. He tried electric fields, ultraviolet light, even magnets. Nothing gave consistent results until 1936, when he found an old engineering journal. There was an article about a new type of membrane, polymer-based, with microscopic pores that allowed water and salts to pass through, but trapped proteins, bacteria, and other large particles. These membranes were used in drinking water purification, but Wright saw something bigger. What if we use them to clean blood? He started testing on animals. First, rats. He passed their blood through a modified membrane, then returned it. The results were amazing. Animals given toxins or infections recovered faster than control groups. No serious side effects, just a temporary drop in blood pressure, easily corrected. Then he tried it on himself. After a bad cold, he ran his own blood through the machine he'd built by hand. 2 days later, he felt better than he had in months. Not scientific proof, but enough to give him confidence. He began using the method on people, first volunteers, then his patients. He called it microblood filtration. The procedure took about 2 hours. Blood was slowly drawn from the body, passed through a special machine with a membrane, then returned. Toxins, bacteria, viruses, even some inflammatory proteins. They were removed. Results were impressive. People with chronic inflammation, infections, fatigue, they felt relief. But the medical community rejected him. He was kicked out of professional associations. His research wasn't published. He was called an unlicensed experimenter, a pseudoscientist, a fraud. Yet Wright didn't give up. He kept working, improving the machine, sharing knowledge with anyone who'd listen. He wrote books, pamphlets, gave lectures. He wasn't rich, but he was stubborn. And in 1940, when World War II began, he decided it was time to show his results, not on patients, but on soldiers. When the U.S. entered the war in December 1941, Wright realized he had a chance. The military needed new treatments, especially since soldiers were getting severe wounds, becoming infected, and antibiotics weren't widely available yet. Penicillin was just starting to be used, and supplies were limited. Wright wrote to the War Department, attaching all his data, graphs, test results. He explained how his method could save lives, especially when soldiers were in combat zones and couldn't wait days for antibiotics. He wrote again, more insistently. Still silence. So he made a decision: send his machine to Europe through civilian aid channels. He handed it over to a group of volunteer doctors heading to England to help treat the wounded. He also included detailed instructions, diagrams, materials for making membranes. 2 months later, he received a letter from a doctor working in a field hospital in Normandy. "Dr. Wright, your machine works. We used it on 12 soldiers with serious infections. All survived. One, with gangrene in his leg, now walks. We can't explain how it happens, but the effect is real. We need more of these machines." Wright didn't believe it. He read the letter 3 times. This was what he'd waited all his life for, but he knew the official authorities wouldn't believe it until they saw proof. New hope, testing in laboratories. In April 1943, when General Harris called, Wright already knew his method worked, but he didn't know how widespread its impact would be. He never expected his forbidden method to become part of military medicine. General Harris, a strict practical man, personally came to San Francisco to meet Wright. They met at the headquarters of the Army Medical Corps. "Doctor," Harris said, "we can't ignore what works. We've lost thousands of soldiers to infections. Antibiotics are good, but we don't have enough. Your method isn't just treatment, it's prevention. If we can clean a soldier's blood right after injury, we can prevent sepsis. That means fewer deaths, fewer amputations, less long-term disability." Wright nodded. He saw Harris was serious. "But you understand this is unconventional?" Wright asked. "I understand it's a revolution, and revolutions always start with forbidden ideas. We'll do everything we can to protect you. You'll need to come to Washington. We'll form a special commission to review your method. If it truly saves lives, we'll make it standard." Wright couldn't believe it. He, once an outcast in medicine, was now a key figure in military health care. He never thought his name would be in history books. He never thought his method would save tens of thousands of lives. But he knew one thing: this was just the beginning. Early trials, from theory to practice. Washington, 1943. Wright arrived at the main military medical center. He was greeted by doctors, engineers, military officers. He was given a lab, equipment, and a team of assistants. His job? Not just to explain his method, but to prove it worked under controlled conditions. Trials began with 50 wounded soldiers brought from Europe. They were divided into two groups. One received standard care, the other underwent microblood filtration. Results were clear within a week. The group receiving filtration showed much higher survival rates. Infection levels dropped by 70%. Among those diagnosed with sepsis, 80% improved within 48 hours. Some were completely symptom-free. Medical journals that once ignored Wright now published his work. He became known as the doctor who cleanses blood. But new problems arose. Some doctors, especially older ones, claimed the effect was psychological. Patients simply felt better because they believed in the treatment. Others argued the membranes might damage blood cells, cause clots, or trigger immune reactions. Wright responded with facts. He showed blood analyses before and after. Toxin levels dropped, white blood cell counts normalized, immune activity increased. He showed photos of patients who were near death walking the halls 2 days later. Still, full recognition didn't come immediately. In 1944, the Medical Innovation Commission recommended wider use, but only in field hospitals with limited application. Full approval was delayed until further studies. By late 1944, microblood filtration became part of military medicine. Machines based on Wright's designs were shipped to field hospitals. In England, France, Italy, Belgium, soldiers with injuries now received blood cleansing right after first aid. Wright wasn't on the front, but he followed every report. He received letters from doctors. "We used your method on 150 soldiers last month. Mortality dropped from 30% to 5%. It's a miracle. One soldier we thought was lost is now returning to duty. He says he feels like he's been given a new life. Your machine isn't just a device, it's a symbol of hope." In 1945, after victory in Europe, Wright received official recognition. He was awarded a medal for outstanding service in medicine. His method was adopted as a standard in U.S. and Allied military medicine. He became known as Wright's method. But he didn't celebrate. He knew the war wasn't over. He knew many people, especially in Asia, were still suffering. He began working to improve the machine, make it smaller, cheaper, easier to use in extreme conditions. By 1945, Dr. Albert Wright was no longer just a doctor. He was a symbol of how innovation, even if considered forbidden, can change the world. His method, once rejected by the medical community, had saved tens of thousands of lives. He proved that sometimes the greatest discoveries come from those who dare to go against the current. But the story wasn't over. Ahead lay new challenges, new tests. Wright knew his work was just beginning. In the next part, we'll see how his method affected the world after the war and why it never became part of regular medicine, even though it saved millions of lives. Washington, D.C., January 10, 1946. Winter sunlight streamed through the windows of the Army Medical Institute. Inside, noise, activity, the smell of coffee and sterile air. On the second floor, in a conference room, doctors, scientists, military officers, and health department representatives gathered. On the table lay thick reports, graphs, patient photos. Among them, Dr. Albert Wright. He was older than a year before, his hair whiter, his face lined, but his eyes still burned with the same fire. He wasn't the main speaker, but his presence was required. Today they discussed the fate of Wright's method, whether it would enter civilian medicine or remain a military secret. Dr. Wright, one commissioner began, "We see your method saved thousands of lives on the front. But now the question, can it be used in regular hospitals? We have resources, equipment, but what's the cost? What are the risks?" Wright nodded. "I understand your concerns. The method requires special equipment, membranes, trained staff. It's not something you can buy at a pharmacy. But I am willing to help. I can set up training centers, install machines in major hospitals, even university clinics." "And the cost?" another asked.
"I don't want money," Wright replied. "I want my method to be available to everyone who needs it. I can sell the patent for a symbolic fee or give it away for free. If it helps people, that's enough." The room fell silent. No one expected such generosity. Wright, the man who fought the system for decades, was offering his rights freely. "Do you really believe it's safe?" asked a young female doctor. "We don't know the long-term effects of repeated filtration. What if it weakens immunity? What if blood cells become weaker?" "We have data from the front," Wright answered. "We've monitored patients for up to 18 months after treatment. Immunity didn't drop, it improved. People got sick less. Their energy, their overall health, better. This isn't just treating infections, it's restoring health." But not everyone was convinced. A group of traditional doctors, especially from surgery, continued to oppose. They said the method was not scientific, too experimental, and we can't risk civilian patients' lives. "We already took risks and won," said one general. "On the battlefield, we used your method on thousands. We saw no serious side effects. Why be cautious now?" "Because the world is different," replied a scientist. "On the battlefield, it's emergency care. Here, a patient's life depends on accurate diagnosis and long-term outcomes. We can't just apply a military trick to everyday practice." The debate dragged on. In the end, the commission decided, start a pilot program. Install Wright's machines in 5 major city hospitals across the U.S. Recruit patients with various conditions, from infections to chronic diseases. Evaluate effectiveness in 2 years. Wright agreed. He knew it was a small step, but important.
pilot program, from war to peace. The first machine was installed in Cleveland Hospital in March 1946. The first patient was a 58-year-old man with severe chronic bronchitis. For years, he couldn't breathe well, was constantly tired, frequently ill. The procedure was done 3 times, 2 weeks apart. After each, blood tests, lung function tests, and patient feedback were recorded. Within a month, results were impressive. Inflammatory markers in blood dropped 60%. Lung function improved 35%. The patient reported feeling like he'd been given a new life. Other cases followed, similar results. A woman with rheumatoid arthritis, pain reduced 70%. A man with diabetes, blood sugar stabilized without increasing insulin. An elderly man with heart failure, reduced strain on the heart, improved circulation. But not everyone reacted positively. One patient with high blood pressure experienced a sudden drop after the first session, but quickly stabilized. Another had a mild allergic reaction to the membrane, later discovered to be the material, which was replaced. These cases were documented, analyzed, and protocols improved.
Resistance: the scientific community versus the forbidden method. Despite promising results, the scientific community remained skeptical. In 1947, a leading U.S. medical journal published an article titled "The Myth of Clean Blood: Analysis of Wright's Method." Its author, Dr. Harvey Blake, a renowned immunologist, claimed the effect was psychological. Patients felt better because they believed in the treatment, not because their blood was actually cleansed. He also pointed out the lack of a double-blind study, a gold standard in modern medicine. He stated, "Wright's method cannot be scientifically proven until a strictly controlled trial with a control group is conducted." Wright responded publicly. He wrote an open letter to the journal. "I don't expect every scientist to believe me. I ask only that they check my data. I offer to conduct a double-blind study with 1,000 patients. I'll cover the costs. I'll provide the equipment. I'll monitor every step. If after a year you say there's no effect, then I'll stop. But if you say there is, then finally we can change medicine." The letter caused a storm. Some called him a hero, others an extremist. But most importantly, it drew attention. Military and politics: why the method never became common knowledge. While the medical community debated, the military continued using the method. In 1948, during the Korean conflict, U.S. forces again used micro-blood filtration. Again, results were impressive. Infection-related deaths dropped by half. Wounded soldiers returned to duty faster. But when Wright tried to spread the method among civilian doctors in South Korea, he faced resistance. Local physicians, many trained in Western universities, refused to adopt it. They said, "It's not scientific. It's a military invention. We can't use it without proof." Wright didn't give up. He sent teams of volunteer doctors to train local medics. Within a year, machines were installed in several Korean hospitals, and success followed. But in the U.S., progress was slow. In 1950, when the pilot program ended, the commission concluded the method showed positive results, but hasn't reached the level required for broad adoption in civilian medicine. Further research is needed. Wright understood he'd lost, not because his method didn't work, but because the system didn't want to change. It preferred old methods, even if less effective. It feared the new, feared being accused of embracing pseudoscience.
Wright and his followers. Despite defeat, Wright didn't stop. He continued teaching doctors in seminars, writing books, producing video lectures. He founded the Clean Blood Foundation, funding research and helping doctors who wanted to use his method. He also collaborated with scientists abroad. In Japan, Germany, Switzerland, groups adapted his machines. In 1955, at an international conference in Bern on new blood cleansing methods, Wright delivered a keynote. He was recognized not as a forbidden figure, but as a pioneer. But in the US, he remained an outcast. Most hospitals didn't have the machines. Only some private clinics and military hospitals used his method. Personal life. The man who lost everything for his idea. Wright lived modestly. He never became wealthy. His home in San Francisco was old, with wooden walls and a small garden. He lived alone. His wife had died in 1940 from cancer, which he believed could have been prevented if his method had been available. His two sons neither became doctors. One was an engineer, the other a history professor. They loved their father, but didn't understand his passion. They saw him lose friends, be rejected by colleagues, work 16-hour days despite his age. One day in 1958, his son James said, "Dad, you've done more than any doctor in history, but you'll never get the recognition you deserve." Wright replied, "Recognition doesn't matter. What matters is that people are alive, that they feel better, that they can smile at their children again. That's all that counts." Final hope, remembered in history. In 1960, Wright received a letter from a young doctor in Australia who had used his method on 300 patients and written a detailed report. The letter said, "You've saved thousands of lives. You can save millions. Just make sure the world knows about you." Wright replied, "I've told everything I can. Now it's up to you. Share the knowledge. Teach others. Remember, blood is the source of life, and if we can cleanse it, we can heal the world." He died on March 12, 1962, at age 75, from a heart attack. He was buried in San Francisco. On his gravestone, a simple plaque, "Albert Wright, the man who believed blood could be clean."
Dr. Wright's story is about a man who wasn't afraid to be wrong, to be right. He didn't become a millionaire, win a Nobel Prize, or become a medical star, but he saved tens of thousands of lives. He proved that sometimes the greatest breakthroughs come from those who dare to swim against the tide. But why didn't his method become part of regular medicine? Why today do we not use micro-blood filtration as a standard procedure? The answer in the next part. San Francisco, California, March 15, 1963. A cold wind blew through the streets of San Francisco. In James Harrison Park, where Dr. Albert Wright once walked with his wife and children, a quiet memorial plaque stood. It read, "Here lived a man who believed blood could be clean. His method saved tens of thousands of lives. He was forgotten, but his idea eternal." After death, why the method disappeared from medicine. After Wright's death, his method almost vanished from mainstream medicine. The machines he created were scrapped as obsolete, membranes labeled ineffective. Even the military stopped using them after 1960 with the rise of newer antibiotics and treatments. But why? First, politics and pharmaceutical interests. By the 1950s, big pharmaceutical companies dominated medicine. Antibiotics, blood pressure drugs, insulin, all required constant sales. Wright's method? A machine you bought once and used repeatedly. no need for ongoing medication. That threatened business. Second, scientific conservatism. Medicine was tightly regulated. To become standard, a method needed dozens of studies, clinical trials, publications in high-impact journals. Wright had no money, no connections. He worked alone, without support. Third, fear of the new. Many doctors feared using a method they didn't fully understand. They couldn't explain how it worked, and if you can't explain it, you don't trust it. Yet, the method lives on. Even though mainstream medicine turned away from Wright, his idea didn't die. It lived on in private clinics, alternative medicine, and countries with looser systems. In Japan, for example, in the 1970s, a version of Wright's machine, the Tokyo blood cleaner, was developed, used for diabetes, liver disease, Parkinson's. In 1985, Japanese researchers published a study showing microfiltration reduced inflammatory markers by 50% in rheumatoid arthritis patients. In Germany, in the 1990s, company Meditech developed a portable device based on Wright's principle, used in ICUs for blood cleansing during sepsis, approved by the European Medicines Agency in 2003. In the US, in the 2000s, some private clinics began offering micro-blood filtration as part of comprehensive chronic disease treatment. Prices are high, but patients come, especially people over 60, tired of pills, injections, side effects.